As Putin burns Ukraine, Zelensky faces a growing political storm at home amid a fresh corruption probe. Zelensky quietly sacks another aide as former Defense Minister Fedorov calls for elections despite the ongoing war. Zelensky's senior aide Irina Mudra is reportedly detained as investigators conduct raids at her home. Amid the political chaos, sacked Defense Minister Fedorov pushes for wartime elections, opening another front for Zelensky. Infighting grips Ukrainian politics even as Russian missiles and drones continue to strike cities across the country. A deputy chief of staff in Zelensky's office was reportedly detained amid a widening corruption investigation, adding fresh pressure on the Ukrainian president's administration. Irina Mudra was reportedly taken into custody after Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies launched a special operation linked to the ongoing probe. Mudra's reported detention came shortly after Zelensky dismissed her as deputy head of his office on August 19, without publicly giving a detailed reason for the decision. The claim that Mudra had been detained was made by Verkhovna Rada lawmaker Alexei Goncharenko, according to TASS, though the circumstances surrounding the detention remain under scrutiny. No official reason was immediately given for her dismissal, but the move came as political and legal pressure continued to build around Zelensky's government. Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, or NABU, said the investigation involves officials linked to Zelensky's office, pointing to a broader probe into alleged corruption. NABU said the alleged group included a serving member of parliament, a former lawmaker and senior officials at a major bank, widening the scope of the investigation. Before her reported detention, Mudra had accused the United States of building its own network of personnel and influence inside Ukraine, raising questions about Washington's role in Kyiv. Mudra claimed that U.S. influence was expanding across several Ukrainian agencies, including NABU, according to reports, adding another sensitive issue to the political debate. Mudra also criticized what she described as a lack of political control over Ukraine's anti-corruption prosecutors, questioning how powerful institutions were being supervised. Her comments now add another layer to the political storm surrounding Zelensky's administration as corruption investigations and internal disputes intensify. The developments came as former Defense Minister Fedorov accused Ukraine of facing what he described as a systemic crisis of governance, further escalating the political confrontation. Fedorov also called for a presidential election, putting direct political pressure on Zelensky as Ukraine continues to remain under wartime conditions.
At this very moment, Ukraine is facing colossal challenges. The war continues. The enemy is changing tactics. We need to produce weapons faster, implement technologies, negotiate with partners, and make critical decisions every day. In such a situation, the country cannot remain without a fully appointed Minister of Defense. This is not normal in a country that fights for its existence every day. Defense policy cannot remain in a temporary state. But the problem is much broader than a single position or a single ministry. We must answer a fundamental question. How should the state function if the war goes on for years? And the next, if the war continues for another year, 2, or 3? Can Russia effectively gain the right to determine when Ukrainians can choose a government again? I am convinced that it cannot. Democracy cannot be held hostage by Russia. We are fighting precisely because we want to remain a free European state. Therefore, we must find a legal, safe, and realistic mechanism that will allow Ukraine to restore a full democratic process even in conditions of prolonged war. This is difficult. It is necessary to ensure the voting rights of the military, millions of Ukrainians abroad, and people in frontline regions. It is necessary to ensure the security of the electoral process, the independence of institutions, and trust in the result. But complexity does not mean impossibility. People cannot live indefinitely in a state where they do not understand why certain decisions are made, why some reforms move forward while others are blocked. Why do decisions that are needed on the front lines today circulate through offices for months? And it is especially dangerous when society gets a feeling that the main criterion for appointing a person is not their professionalism, not results, and not the ability to change the country, but their personal loyalty to the system. A modern state cannot work this way. And even more so, a country fighting a war for its survival cannot work this way. We must also talk about corruption, not because it is a popular word, but because during a war, corruption takes on a completely different meaning. In peacetime, Stolen money means a worse road, hospital, or school. During war, stolen money can mean a drone that was not bought, ammunition that did not arrive, an electronic warfare system that was missing, a vehicle that did not evacuate the wounded, a technology that could have been put into production, but was not. Therefore, corruption during wartime is not just a financial problem. It is a question of our ability to survive and win. Every hryvnia that was supposed to work for defense must work for defense, and not for a private pocket, not for political influence, not for supporting someone's schemes, and not for preserving someone's position. When the public is informed of decisions, but no one explains why they were made. In this way, the most important thing is gradually destroyed, trust between the citizen and the state, and this trust must be restored. Elections are not just ballots. This is a moment when the government comes back to the citizen and says, "Hey, we have done this. Now you decide whether you continue to trust us." And it is this very principle that distinguishes a democratic state from a system where the government itself decides when society can evaluate it. We must not let Putin decide when Ukrainians can choose their government. Ukrainian democracy must not depend on the goodwill of the Kremlin.
Russia struck Ukraine's national police headquarters in Zhytomyr with S-8000 Banderol drones on August 19th, marking another major attack on a Ukrainian city. According to Ukrainian officials, the strike killed 2 police officers and injured at least 40 people, causing significant casualties in the attack. Details of Russia's latest strikes were reported by the Kyiv Independent on August 20th, highlighting the scale of the overnight assault. The attack came just over a week after another Russian drone strike hit Zhytomyr on August 9th, keeping the region under renewed pressure. Russia is increasingly turning to jet-powered weapons alongside Shahd-type attack drones, adding faster and potentially harder to intercept threats to its arsenal. The S-8000 Banderol can reportedly travel significantly faster than propeller-driven Shahd drones, giving it a very different battlefield profile. That higher speed could leave Ukrainian air defenses with less time to detect, track and intercept the incoming threat before impact. Russia also launched 2 Iskander-M ballistic missiles along with 65 drones and other aerial targets during the overnight attack. Just hours later, Russia launched another ballistic missile attack against Kyiv after midnight on August 20th, sending the capital into another night of panic. The strikes killed 2 people and injured at least 12 others, according to Ukrainian authorities, as explosions were reported across the city. Multiple blasts shook Kyiv as missiles struck targets or debris fell across several districts, leaving damage and fires in their wake. Residential buildings were damaged in the barrage, while fires broke out at several locations across the Ukrainian capital. A children's hospital in Kyiv's Solomyansky district was also damaged during the missile barrage, adding to the impact on civilian infrastructure. Windows were blown out and cars caught fire on the hospital grounds, according to city officials, as the attack spread damage across the area. Residents were urged to remain inside shelters as ballistic missiles continued to threaten the capital and further strikes remained possible. Ukraine also reported incoming Zircon missiles launched from Russia's Kursk region toward Kyiv, adding another layer to the latest Russian attack.
Economic dynamics overall remain modest but positive. It is clear that a whole range of factors affects the pace of economic growth, including external pressure and terrorist attacks on industrial and infrastructure facilities. Of course, such attacks have had no, and cannot have any critical consequences. But they do cause us harm, of course. That is obvious. We understand this and apparently know it. I would like to emphasize once again that we need to strengthen the country's sovereignty and increase efficiency both in defense and security and in the socio-economic sphere. Despite the recent terrorist attacks I have already mentioned, our trade infrastructure is operating efficiently and sustainably. Work is certainly being carried out under considerable pressure, but everyone working in this sector is coping quite well with the tasks that the times place before us. At the same time, logistics and storage facilities require restoration, including with state involvement. In this regard, I ask the government to adopt an appropriate program. At the same time, It needs to be taken into account that damaged facilities should be restored at a qualitatively new technological level. A separate area is the construction of power grids and generating facilities. This is also a critically important task, because as the economy, regions, and territories develop and new projects and digital services are launched, electricity consumption always increases and will continue to increase. We know this very well.
Dear Ukrainians, this morning the Russians struck a minibus in Kherson with a drone. It was another act of brutality that the occupiers commit every day. It was absolutely clear that this was an ordinary minibus, civilian transport, but the Russians struck it anyway. Later that same day, the Russians struck Zhytomyr. It was a deliberate and treacherous attack on the regional police headquarters building. Throughout the day, another day of this war, there were also strikes on Zaporizhia, the Kharkiv region, the Sumy region, the Chernihiv region, the Donetsk region, and the Dnipropetrovsk region. Unfortunately, there are fatalities. In Kherson alone, 4 people were killed in the single strike on the minibus. In the strike on Zhytomyr, nearly 30 people were injured and 2 were killed. There have also been victims in other regions. My condolences go to all the families and loved ones of those whose lives were taken by Russian terror. My main task for Ukraine's defense minister in these conditions is to truly set up our defense system, our production and procurement system, and the system for supplying our troops. It must be organized in such a way that the defense of life in Ukraine receives everything necessary to repel Russian strikes, hold positions on the front line, conduct active operations, and deliver meaningful strikes against Russia in response to its terror, this war, and these killings, which Putin has effectively turned into a new Russian ideology. We must uproot this ideology of war. Yevhen Kamara proved through his earlier service in Alpha that he does not throw words to the wind and knows very well that occupiers are not defeated with empty promises. I expect the Ministry of Defense to expand the scope of our deep strike operations. Together with Ukrainian weapons manufacturers, it must provide greater capabilities to protect Ukraine's skies. Together with partners, it must strengthen our defensive operations and our offensive actions. There is already good cooperation between Kamara and Drapati. I thank them for this. Before winter, we in Ukraine must be confident, and we will be confident, as much as possible in our defense and in our positions. I am grateful to the members of Parliament for their strong support today for Kamara's appointment as Minister of Defense, and for their support for Andriy Sybiha's appointment as Ukraine's Foreign Minister. Our diplomacy also has very clear tasks. This concerns communication with partners that must give Ukraine greater strength. Even amid the political turbulence Europe may enter with the start of the new political season. We need stable support and durable relations with our partners, and therefore modernization in the work of our diplomatic corps. Modern diplomatic tools, modern approaches to solving problems, and concrete results. I also thank everyone today for passing the law that we discussed in detail. It expands support programs for one of the most vulnerable parts of our society: families raising children with disabilities. The law guarantees increased assistance and introduces a multi-level system of state-funded social services for children. I expect the law as soon as possible for signature, and I expect the government to fully account for it in the budget. One more thing. I signed a decree awarding the title of Hero of Ukraine to Junior Lieutenant Vladislav Polsky for his swift and brave reaction in a combat situation and for saving the lives of our soldiers. On August 15th, an unquestionably heroic act took place. Vladislav used a pickup truck to rescue 2 servicemen from an area under attack by Russian drones. Our soldiers had been carrying out a combat mission and were wounded. An evacuation had begun with the help of an unmanned ground vehicle. The Russians struck that vehicle. To avoid losing lives and wasting time, Vladislav decided to act. He drove in with a pickup truck and took the wounded men out. It is an outstanding story. Great courage. An example of a commander's action that deserves to be followed. We must take care of our people. Thank you, Vladislav. And today there was also a prisoner exchange. We returned another 103 people from Russian captivity, our soldiers. It is not easy, but we continue working to ensure that exchanges take place. We are preparing the next stage of exchanges. Thank you to all our warriors, to every man and woman defending Ukraine and defending our people. It is important for all of us to work together for Ukraine and for our people.
Upgrade your news experience with the all-new HT app. Download now.